So again, if you're just now joining us, if you could, we would love to know what college or school you're coming to us from, and if there's anything that you're hoping to get out of today's session. You can feel free to just put that in the chat.
I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I'm going to ask Emma if you would share with us in the chat. Emma and I have met together and so it would be lovely to get some feedback from you as well. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate you for sharing.
All right, I'm going to give it one more minute. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you, Kayla.
All right. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining. My name is Erin Ahart. I'm a career counselor here in the Columbian College serving graduate students. And I'm joined today by my wonderful colleague, Dr. Johnette Ruffner-Caesar, who is also a career counselor in CCAS serving graduate students. So I am so excited for this workshop. This is something, managing job search anxiety is something that almost everyone, at least in my opinion and my experience, has dealt with. These are extremely common feelings to have. I personally have dealt with job search anxiety, specifically around the interview process, and I'm excited for you all to hear from different staff members from GW today about their experiences dealing with this as well. So today you will get to hear other staff members' stories, hear from a CAPS professional, and I'm going to go over our agenda and also the reasons for job search anxiety and why some of you might be joining us today as well. But before I go any further, I do want to give Johnette the opportunity to introduce herself, as you will be hearing from both of us today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. We're very excited that you're here and excited about this conversation. I have been a career counselor here at GW for close to a year now, but I also have a private practice, a professional services agency where I work with mid to senior level folks. So for the fact that you all are here and having this conversation early on really excites me. So I hope that you will take this as an opportunity, not just to learn from us and the panel, but that you would share some insights as well so that we can learn from each other and have a robust conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Johnette. And so now to kick us off, I'm going to start by acknowledging some of the reasons that people deal with stress and anxiety related to the job search, and maybe some things that you all have experienced yourself too. So I first want to start off by saying that the very nature of job searching is stressful and overwhelming, even without having anxiety attached to it. So job search anxiety just adds to something that just by itself is so stressful already. So I want to acknowledge that first. There are all kinds of reasons why people deal with anxiety related to the job search. And so you might be dealing with feelings of not being good enough. Maybe you have personal challenges or barriers that you face that might add to this feeling of not being good enough, comparing yourself to professionals in your field. Maybe you worry about not getting a job in your field or not getting a job that others approve of. Maybe you worry about not making enough money. Maybe you're navigating a period of uncertainty in your life in general, feel anxiety around the interview process, fear relocating, leaving your current position, negotiating a job offer, starting a new job. There are so many reasons that people have anxiety around this process. And maybe some of us are just anxious because there are so many steps to job searching today, from getting your materials up to par before you even apply to waiting around for a response from an employer that you're really excited about who you've applied to work at their organization. So I'm not sharing all of these reasons for anxiety to overwhelm you, but it's more to validate you because it truly is something that almost everyone experiences. If they tell you that they have never been stressed out related to the job search, I wonder if they've ever gone through the job search at all, quite honestly, or if they're just not telling the truth, because these feelings truly are so understandable and something that almost everyone deals with. And so the reason for meeting today is to help you manage these feelings. Today's session includes a presentation from Rashonda Riley from CAPS, who will provide some general anxiety management techniques that you all can use and take away. And we'll also have a panel of GW staff sharing their stories and experiences dealing with stress around the job search. And finally, I want to share that this session is really your time. We want to make sure that you get out of this session what you came here to learn. So after the panelists speak today and after Rashonda speaks today, you will have time to ask them your questions. So if there's something that you're really hoping for us to speak on, something you're really wondering about, please hold that thought, write it down on your phone or on a piece of paper, then make sure you save it for when the question and answer portion of the session rolls around so that we can answer your questions. And I think I've shared enough information with you for now. So with that, I will turn it over to Rashonda Riley, who is the Assistant Director of Counseling and Outreach at CAPS. So thank you so much, Rashonda, for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Erin, for that introduction. Again, my name is Rashonda, she, her pronouns, and I serve CAPS as the Assistant Director of Counseling Outreach. And so hopefully I can share my screen. Technology is not always my best friend. Can everybody see that? Perfect.
Yes.
Great. So just kind of a generalized, like, brief overview. Again, this is who I am. And so hopefully at the end, when you ask questions, I'm happy to kind of share my contact information or drop it into the chat. You can find me in the Student Health Center, inside the Student Center at the ground floor level. It has my wonderful contact information. And just a little bit about CAPS, if you're not familiar, you've never used the services before. And so we're located, like I said, in the Student Health Center on Foggy Bottom campus and on Mountain Vernon campus. And so no matter what you're dealing with or what you're going through, you can find us Monday through Saturday from 12 to 4 on both of those campuses. And then Monday through Saturday, again, 12 to 4, even virtually as well. And just a few brief introductions about our services. And so we offer like brief individual counseling. So when it comes to the job search piece around anxiety or just anything else that maybe is coming up in your world too, then we offer brief individual counseling for that. Group services, also just support spaces. We run a lot of like kind of individualized workshops around just anxiety toolbox or just dealing with like procrastination or other things that sometimes I think come up when we're kind of looking through the job search as well. And then the same thing, kind of just like workshops around like various things that come up as far as just like holistic well-being as well. We also offer Timely Care, which is a 24/7 virtual healthcare platform, free to you as a student. Not going to get into all the specifics, but again, if you have any questions about Timely Care or any of the services, when the question part comes up, then I'm happy to kind of answer questions about those things as well. I think Erin did a really great introduction to anxiety, so we don't want to like really dive into it too much, but anxiety is a normal mental and physical reaction to something that is kind of perceived threatening. And so sometimes when we think about like just generalized anxiety or the job search, it's like, I don't necessarily find it threatening, but we can find it kind of like a challenging experience. And so sometimes that can elicit a little bit of anxiety in us. And so these are just a few symptoms. I think anyone who's experienced anxiety can say, I've either experienced all these plus 10 more. So some of the ones that are a little bit more common, like just difficulty controlling worry, feeling a little bit nervous or restless and just tension. And so maybe we can feel that in a physical way, like within our neck and our back. Sometimes maybe we can feel that even with just like more increased headaches. It's kind of sometimes like a panic or like a doom feeling. And I think when we talk about that within like the job search too, like what if I don't get a job? What happens if I don't get a call back? And so we can kind of start to feel like this like impending, like very like doom moment that sometimes happens in that way too. We can sometimes experience trouble sleeping or concentrating as well. And physical symptoms of anxiety. So whether that's like sweating or trembling or fatigue, we can also experience that in stomach aches or pains in our stomach. And so anxiety can again be a mental or physical reaction to something that's happening. So just thinking about in a very kind of quick way, ways to cope, right? These can be relaxation techniques, so deep breathing or grounding, meditation. And I'll kind of go into each one of those a little bit more to give you an actual technique for those things. Sometimes we just need a distraction. So when anxiety is getting like really provoked and we feel like I just can't focus anymore, but sometimes it's a good moment to say like, let's just pause for a second. And so maybe that is just like listening to music as a way of like practicing mindfulness or coping. Maybe it's listening to a favorite podcast or a favorite TV show, like anything that allows you to not necessarily refocus your anxiety, but to refocus the thing that is making you anxious, right? So if we just need a moment to not apply to jobs right now, and it's like, just take 5 minutes to listen to some music to kind of just recenter and reground yourself is also a good way to do that. Physical activity. So again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to the gym every day, but it can be so much as just like going for a walk, doing yoga, maybe you like to jog, maybe you like to rock climb. The weather is getting really pretty. And so just really thinking about sometimes like the physical activities that you can also engage in, even as a distraction tool as well. Social engagement can be helpful. Always challenge people to say like calling people or talking to people that are going to decrease your anxiety and not increase it is also really helpful. So just really thinking about like, who is my support systems that I know like we don't necessarily have to talk about the things that are making me anxious, but they'll kind of distract me, or we'll talk about something funny that happened in the week, can be really helpful. Processing. So that can look very differently. So that can be just sometimes we need to recognize and label our emotions, and saying sometimes just as frankly and openly as like, I'm just feeling really anxious about what's going on right now. Like I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And so sometimes just really labeling our emotions can be a really great form of processing. Journaling is always really helpful. Again, it doesn't have to always be kind of like a Dear Diary moment, but just even thinking through like just feeling really anxious or stressed, or this really good thing that has happened. Sometimes I also think about it as a way of like a gratitude journal. So even in thinking about things that are really stressful for us, what is something that we did really good in the midst of our anxiety, or something that we've kind of experienced? And it could be just as simple as like, my favorite TV show is back on after a hiatus. And so just really thinking through sometimes like with anxiety, we forget the good parts of that as well. Sometimes again, engaging in therapy can be really helpful. And I think in the spirit of kind of like, what can I get out of anxiety, is that the coping skills and intervention, sometimes just like talking about the things that are making you anxious can be really helpful. When we're anxious, we kind of like to hold it all in, and sometimes we need an outlet for those things. And so really thinking about processing is like, how do I find an outlet for sometimes the anxious feelings that I'm having? It could also be creative. And so again, whether it's like music, writing, painting, doing a craft, just again, like another way to kind of distract yourself. Sometimes when we're anxious, like we get really kind of tense, right? But we also get really like hyperactive. And so sometimes we need a way to kind of like get out those feelings and kind of get out that energy in a way. And so maybe for some people, that's not necessarily in a physical way, that can be in a very creative way as well. Anxiety makes us kind of sometimes disorganized. The disorganizedness increases our anxiety. So sometimes like a helpful way of coping is making a list, prioritization, maybe, you know, it's trying to kind of manage like school plus work plus the job search piece, and all of those things in combination can make us anxious at one time. And so really trying to think through like, you know, how do I kind of prioritize things? Do I look at it from SMART goals where it's like, what is something realistic that I can do? And so really thinking through that sometimes our anxiety comes from just kind of like needing to take a moment to kind of organize, write in a calendar, things like that as well. Sometimes if you're a spiritual person or a religious person, you know, a way of coping again can be through prayer or reading or just any type of like spiritual connection that you may have. And then the last piece is just kind of acceptance. I always say that anxiety is just a normal part of a response, right? So it's like a very chemical thing that happens. And so the moment we kind of just stop and really accept like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious, this is why this is coming up for me, then it does start to kind of alleviate things, right? It doesn't mean that you're kind of like succumbing to the anxiety, but you're just recognizing this as a normal kind of response to some of the stimuli or some of the external factors that are kind of going on as well. And then, so just a few techniques for managing anxiety. There's so many techniques for managing anxiety, and I think each one of us can have like a different style. And so, you know, really thinking through like what works the best for you. I always say whenever we're doing any type of technique, it's a behavioral thing. And so sometimes that can take time to kind of get adjusted to it. So if you journaled for a few days and you're like, I don't really know if I feel less anxious or if it's really helping me, always say give it a, you know, a good week of you doing something to really define whether or not it's something that you can stick to or not. If it's something that you've never really experienced before, the natural inclination is not going to, for it to be in your behavior. And so sometimes those things can also take time. A very easy kind of technique is box breathing. And so there's so many different ways of breathing, but I always say when you're anxious, a lot of times our heart rate increases and blood flow increases and all of these other chemical things are happening. And so a lot of times we really forget to breathe, right? And how important just like taking a second to breathe is. Sometimes when we are anxious, our breathing then becomes very like quick, right? And that's not really helping us either. And so I think sometimes thinking about techniques that just kind of help us breathe, box breathing being one of those. And so I feel like sometimes this is like a really helpful diagram that I utilize as well. So just breathing in and counting to 4 very slowly. And it's very also like a mindfulness-based situation where you're really kind of, you're free focusing on your breathing instead of the thing that's making you really anxious. And so I always say, like, sometimes we can do this in class. No one knows that you're practicing box breathing. You can do it at work. And so just like kind of a very quick way for you to do this. Diaphragm breathing is another form of kind of box breathing. And so that's kind of like you putting your hand right on your diaphragm where you kind of can feel your chest kind of rise and decrease as well. And you're really just kind of focusing in on your breathing, right? How your chest kind of, again, like you have this expansion and you're just kind of focusing in on that. So it's just another way to kind of like ground yourself when you're feeling really anxious. I also say this is a good way to do even when you're not experiencing anxiety as well, just kind of like a good practice. So that way, when anxiety does kind of creep in, you kind of have something already in your kind of toolbox that you can kind of turn to as well. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise, I think, is like a very common one that we see and experience a lot. The difference between this and kind of other techniques is the purpose of this one is sometimes when we're experiencing a high intensity anxiety. And so maybe people have experienced anxiety that sometimes can lead to like what feels like a panic attack. And so this can be a really great way to kind of like try to get you to breathe, but also to refocus your attention and refocus your mind a little bit. And so kind of going through the room or wherever you are in a lot of ways and kind of like following these steps. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, and really just kind of just taking a second, right? And just going through each one of these kind of very slowly, you know, to kind of help yourself kind of reground yourself. But also, again, like refocus your intention, right? Like when we're anxious, we're really hyper focused a lot of like this one situation. Maybe we have some cognitive distortions, which means maybe we're having some like distorted thinking about what's causing our anxiety. And so sometimes that can also be really helpful too. And then back to just mindfulness and stress reduction. And so again, we talked about our deep breathing. And so the diaphragm breathing as well can be helpful. Guided meditation. And so whether again, that's through an app or any type of like meditation session. Again, meditation can look like a wide range of things. And so again, that could be music, that could be reading. The goal is that you're just really focused in on something else beyond the things that are kind of making you stressed or anxious. Maybe it's to kind of give yourself insight to what's making you anxious, to kind of reframe some of the thoughts that maybe you're having that are also making you anxious. And so just kind of like a moment to really pause. You can do this from literally a minute to 30 minutes to an hour, right? It's really just kind of thinking through what's going to be the most helpful for you. If you're an anxious person where you can't sit through meditation because it makes you more anxious when you're kind of still and quiet, don't do it in the quiet, right? Like maybe this is a moment in which you listen to music or you go for a car ride and take in the scenery. Number 4 talks about kind of mindful walking. And so maybe it's like you want to listen to the sounds of cars passing or just kind of nature and really thinking about things. And so you can also engage in kind of like a mindful walking. Back up to kind of number 3, which is progressive muscle relaxation. And so this is kind of just around like really when we sometimes feel anxious or stressed, we feel that in a physical sense within our muscles, within our back and our shoulders. And so sometimes when we're really kind of like tensing and untensing these muscles, you can kind of start to really feel like, okay, maybe I was a little stressed, and it starts to kind of release some of the tension in those muscles. I kind of do it in a guided practice of really starting from like tensing the muscles kind of in your eyes, like squeezing them really tightly and then unsqueezing them, and then just kind of going all the way through all of your muscles, all the way to the kind of soles of your feet as well. It can take anywhere from a couple minutes to doing this. And again, most of the time I always say like this can be really helpful even when you're in class or you're at work where nobody can see you tensing and untensing muscles, maybe except for in your eyes. But that could be a really good like kind of quick practice when you're feeling really anxious as well. Again, we talked about journaling. So again, this could just be a good way to practice and process emotions and kind of just reduce stress. Tracking progress or setbacks, growth can be really helpful when we look back and say like, I was really stressed about this one particular situation. And then now I'm noticing like I'm not as stressed about that. That could be really helpful to kind of just see progress or things that you kind of enacted. And again, we talked about kind of a little bit about gratitude exercises, whether that's in a journal or just out in general as well. Another thing that someone kind of recently put me onto is on Amazon, they have kind of like kind of the gratitude cards, right? Where you can pull a card every day and it reminds you of something to be grateful for as a way, because sometimes we just in the heat of the moment are really experiencing anxiety. We kind of forget about those things as well. And so those pieces can be helpful. Well, that is it for me. Thank you so much, Erin.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rashonda. That was so informative and so helpful. And I loved learning about the box breathing technique because you're right. No one can know that you're doing it, which I appreciate. So now we're going to move on to the panel portion of the workshop. And if you have any questions for Rashonda specifically, feel free to write them in the chat, or you can also email us following the presentation and we can connect you to CAPS. And so to start off with our panelists, I will turn it over to Johnette, who will introduce them.
Rashonda, thank you so much. That was very, very helpful and lays an awesome foundation for our conversation with our panelists. So I would like to introduce them. So first is Meg Worm. Meg is the Assistant Director of Career Development and Graduate Student Services at the Elliott School of International Affairs. Cole Godin is the industry career coach here at George Washington's Center for Career Services, serving students seeking careers in international affairs, development, and public policy. And we also have Nicole Davidson. Nicole is the manager of doctoral student services in the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, Office of Graduate Studies. So everyone, I know that you're just eager to be the first to respond to this question. But please, if you would, share a few details about your professional journey and share with our audience about a time when you managed stress or anxiety related to the job search or a work situation. So I will allow someone to go first, or I can call on you. Either one works.
I never mind volunteering, so I don't mind going first and being the guinea
Thank
pig.
you.
Yeah, so as she said, my name is Meg. I work at the Elliott School, and I've been at GW for about 4 years now. Before that, I worked as an RA at my undergraduate institution. I worked as a graduate teaching assistant at my graduate institution. Over the summers, I would work at the Boys and Girls Club running education programming, summer education programming in my hometown. And then my very first job after I finished graduate school was with an educational technology company called 2U. And my job stress experience that I would like to share is related to that job there. So as you heard, a lot of experience at universities and nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Club, and 2U was like my first foray into the private sector. And I thought that it would be like, I was like, how different could it be than, you know, working in education for a nonprofit, doing education work at a private company, publicly traded company. Turns out very different. When the goal is to make money, then the way that you do work is very different. And so I quickly started to burn out in that role. And I was after about a year, actually after about a year there, and I ended up being there for about 1 year and 7 months total. And so when I decided to, what triggered me to really start pushing really hard on the job search was there was a round of layoffs. And even though they didn't say anything about us having something happen to us, if you've ever worked in the private sector, you know that once one layoff happens, you're always worried that your role is on the chopping block next. And so I got really serious about getting on the job hunt again and moving back into the nonprofit world and preferably working directly with the university. So with that goal in mind, I hit especially GW really hard. I hit all of the DC area higher education institutions pretty hard, but GW in particular, I applied to a lot of a lot of jobs. They've changed their job search portal since I applied, and so I can't go back and check, but it was dozens of jobs where I just throw my application in the ring. And I actually interviewed at 4 offices total, so 3 before I ended up actually in my role at the Elliott School. So I was very dedicated and not very successful at getting a job until I was, which was great. And so some of the things that kind of helped me through that process, you know, and I also will say that I started this process in September of 2019, and then I took on this role in February of 2020. So it was a few months of this constant back and forth and everything else of applying. And so some of the things that helped me cope with that process, this anxiety-inducing process, because it was very anxiety-inducing, was one, reflection. So after every interview, I would reflect on my own performance and think to myself, you know, how do I feel like I did? Do I feel like I did a good job? There were some questions that I know I kind of tripped up on. How would I approach that differently the next time? So that the next time I was in a situation like that, even if they didn't ask the same types of questions, like reflecting on my experience and what I would do differently gave me more tools and more anecdotes to work with when I was in the interview process. But I would also reflect on the interview experience as a whole, meaning what I heard from the offices that I was interviewing with, because this is a chance for you to learn about the organization just as much as it is an organization to learn about you. And so after every interview, I would think to myself, like, based on the questions they asked me and their personality and the kind of vibes I got from them, like, how would I feel working there? And honestly, even though I was very disappointed the first 3 times I interviewed with offices and didn't get those jobs, when I reflected looking back, I thought there was something about that interview process that I don't think would have been a good fit for me, whether it was the location or the way that they approached work or some of the questions that they asked, raising some red flags for me. And I think that helped me stay positive and persistent, which is my next tip for how I kind of dealt with that, or how my other coping mechanism for how I dealt with that. So reminding myself that just because I didn't get it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Maybe it wouldn't have been a good fit anyway was really helpful. But also just kind of remembering like that I'm a firm believer in if something is meant to work out, it will. And that mindset kind of helped me when I would submit all these applications that didn't end up going anywhere, or didn't even get interviews or callbacks or anything like that for months at a time. So it sounds very cheesy, but I think it's very, very important to stay positive and stay persistent, because that's the only way that you will be successful. And it's the only way you'll keep your head kind of screwed on straight through these processes. And my last tip or my last coping mechanism, which is also a tip to you, is to continue to live your life through the job search process. I think it can be very easy, especially if you're a student now and you've been in this academic environment and you're moving right from an academic environment into the job search, like especially in a master's program or something, the mindset is if you have time to do something relaxing, then you could be reading an article, you could be working on your capstone, you could be doing this, you could be doing that, and you shouldn't really have free time. And so I think it's easy to get into that mindset when we're in the job search too. Like if you have time to binge watch The Great British Bake Off on Netflix, then that means you have time to go submit applications. But it's actually very important to take time to binge watch The Great British Bake Off, because if you're only spending your time submitting applications, like the quality is going to go down because you're just going to be stressed and tired and anxious and wanting to get it over with. And so I think it's really important to continue to live your life. My brother came to visit, my mom came to visit. I went home for Christmas in that time frame. I didn't spend all of my time outside of work applying for jobs. I was dedicated, I was persistent, I applied to a lot of jobs, but it wasn't the only thing I was doing. And I think that helped too. And then, like I said, I ended up fourth time's a charm. The fourth place I interviewed at GW was the Elliott School, and it's been a perfect fit. And I really loved working here. So it was worth all of the anxiety. But that's kind of my journey and my advice to you.
Beautiful, Meg. Those are awesome jewels. So reflect, stay positive, and continue to live your life. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Cole, let's just sandwich you here. If you would like to go next, you can.
Oh, sorry, you had paused for a second. But I'm assuming this was for the same question, correct? Oh, not sure if she froze.
We lost her for a second, but yes, feel free to go ahead and share your yes.
Gotcha. Oh, and thank you, Emma, for the shout out. Shout out to Emma. We had a chance to work at the law school together as well. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cole Gooden, and thank you, Johnette, for the wonderful introduction. I am an industry career coach for the International Affairs undergraduate students here at the Center for Career Services. So I definitely have some similar, bit of a similar path to Meg with some of the things that you described. So I didn't realize that we were both fellow RAs. So that was that definitely tracks. I love it. So yes, I guess I can start off from there. I graduated from Louisiana State University, and I had kind of really gotten firsthand exposure to what I wanted to do for my career whenever I took on that resident assistant job. And it really exposed me to higher education and just that realm of what you could do within universities and higher education institutions. And luckily, I was able to study abroad in Spain during my time in college as well. And that was really impactful for me. And I just really started to understand how meaningful it can be to experience another way of life and just another culture. And I wanted to kind of encourage that sentiment for a lot of other students and for the people around me. So that's kind of where I started to focus in on that international education piece, which is now what I will be graduating in May for my master's in international education. A little bit of backstory. So I had actually graduated for my bachelor's degree in May of 2020. So for those of you who don't know, that was the height of COVID. And I was desperately trying to find a job in higher ed. And for me, I had gotten like 2.5 years of being a resident assistant, and I thought that I had taken on other leadership roles that could help in terms of, applying to different jobs. But I was constantly confronted with, unfortunately, we are experiencing a hiring freeze right now. So because so many universities were going on lockdown or just not hiring, and I felt at such a loss, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I do think that personally, that was definitely not one of my highest points in life. And I do think I very much appreciated having my family and support system to kind of help me along. And I think it was a conversation with my mom where I was just like, I need to do something. I was like, I'm antsy. I need to do something just to get out of this house. And I ended up becoming a DoorDash driver for a little bit, and I made some money off of that. And it was really, for me, like a great experience because I love driving, I love running errands. And although it wasn't as necessarily profitable for me, because every single time I would go to pick up an order, I would then order that same food right after. So, but so I think that was something, an opportunity that was very, as not as ideal as it sounds. It was something that kept me going in the meantime to really, I was doing something that I was still enjoying, loving that driving aspect and going around, and still like, the littlest things like getting to see people's smiles on faces whenever you get to like deliver at their door. That was something that was still somewhat meaningful to me. But fortunately, I then was able to, I started applying all over the place. I think I cast a really wide net. I started going into, even kind of dipping a little bit into different industries. But I got a job at a jewelry store in, it was kind of like a high-end jewelry store, and I was essentially a sales associate, which definitely gave me an opportunity to make some more money. And I definitely enjoyed my time there as well. And I think I was able to really build some of the different customer service skills while I was there. But I still knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to pursue higher education in some capacity, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to approach it. However, something else also took precedent where I was like, I also kind of feel like I want this sense of adventure. So weirdly enough, I ended up applying to some seasonal jobs because one of my friends had done like a seasonal position as well. And I ended up working on Catalina Island off the coast of California for a summer. And that was also very, very, very enlightening experience. And from that, I was, able to gain like different hospitality skills, again, building on those customer service skills. But it was kind of like a pivot for a moment just to then going back to higher education. And during my time there, I was like, I still want to pursue this. I still want to pursue higher education. So I ended up applying to a community coordinator position in a very small college in Massachusetts, and was able to work there for a year. And during that time, I was like, I really want to go to grad school. And this was kind of another hardship that I ended up facing because I was like, how do I go about working and getting experience while also like being able to pursue a grad program? And I ended up applying to a bunch of different jobs at GW. I had really wanted one position in particular, but unfortunately didn't get a chance to get an offer for it. And I think that for me was something that was also another turning point. And I think I want to go back with Meg's sentiment of, I really took it as like a learning experience and really trying to reflect and stay positive. So as soon as that had happened, I actually booked a an appointment with my career coach at my undergraduate institution. And I was like, look, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm getting all these different interviews and I'm not getting any positions. There's obviously something wrong that I'm doing and I don't know what it is. And so we were like, okay, let's talk it out. And then it was kind of a question of like, well, what do you think are some of the questions that you often stumble on? And we talked through that. And after that moment, I then was able to interview for a next position at the law school as a program coordinator for field placement. And luckily, I ended up securing that position. And, you know, again, I think that moment of reflection and really trying to stay positive and keeping in mind that like it's something that's not personal. It could literally just be a way of how you phrase something or what you bring up. Like, you know, just being able to kind of build that skill of telling a story, I think is very crucial and important. And then, you know, worked at the law school for a little bit, for about a year, and really got some experience with kind of more of the career development administrative side. But I was like, I miss these one-on-one advising appointments that I got to have during my time in Massachusetts. And I was like, you know what? And then I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm going on forever. My last portion is weird circumstances had happened, and my colleague currently actually worked with my career coach at my undergraduate institution. She ended up connecting with me while I was at the law school, and we built a relationship. And then she ended up forwarding me this position, and now I'm essentially here in this role. So I think also too, it's really interesting just to see the power of networking and building relationships with people. And also coming from Louisiana, I never would have thought that I would have gotten a job in DC from my career coach that I had in Louisiana. So world is very small, but I apologize for rambling, but thank you for letting me share that.
Not at all. Cole, thank you so much. You all, these stories are awesome. I can't wait to dig in with the questions. So super great takeaways. Get a support system. It's okay to be a DoorDash driver or sales associate. You make money and you gain skills. And talk to someone, okay? Even if it's not a career counselor, talk with someone to help you to walk this journey and reduce some of the stress. Okay, so now we are ready for Nicole. We are really excited to hear your story as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me as a part of this panel to tell my story and to hear from everyone about their stories and these wonderful techniques that Rashonda provided. So I am further along on my career journey. I've actually been working for a little bit over 20 years. So I am a career higher education professional. And when I came into this field, it was almost as if faculty looked at the position as if we weren't professionals, that people didn't choose to be a higher ed student affairs, student personnel professional. And so it's the field has changed quite a bit since I first started out. But in terms of my personal career journey, I would say that I think of it in 4 different parts. First, when I graduated from college, I was a first generation college student. And so graduating from college and moving into the job market, that had a kind of a component to it of real anxiety in terms of, I've now gone to college, I've got to prove to everybody that I can get a job because I went to college and everyone else in my family didn't have that background. I've got to get a job. And so there was that component. So there was a certain amount of anxiety around that at that time, being this first gen, having to get a job just out of college and prove myself. And the way I coped with it at that time, I think, was really just, a lot of youthful energy, just kind of living my life, the tip that you guys are giving, which is live your life, be surrounded by people that are a support network, but also continue to be tenacious and creative and think about the thing that matters to you and what you want to do next. If I stayed with my first job out of college, I probably would be very unsatisfied today. So I decided that I would be reflective and think about what was going to work for me in my personality type and the kind of life that I wanted to have. I wanted to have enough money to be able to put a roof over my head and take care of myself, which is really important when you're coming out of college and you're looking for a job. You're very often thinking, okay, is there some kind of division between the thing that really matters to me to do and putting a roof over my head? So I very frequently had to think of how can I match those two things. It had to be something that I felt fulfilled doing, and then something that could provide me sustenance for life. So I think the way I coped with it was just to keep at it, and not let the fearful moments that I had in those times overcome me. Very often I was like, okay, I'm never going to get the job that I feel that I should have, or that I want to have, or that's going to allow me to take care of myself. But stepping back for a moment from those fears and confronting them and saying, okay, they're real, and then moving forward. Always kind of just picking myself up and moving forward. The next juncture that I think about is grad school. So when I was doing grad school, I was working full-time in higher ed. And a lot of us that work in higher ed may be going to grad school at the same time. And for me, during that process, I thought about, when I'm done with this, I need to get the job. So now that I'm done with, when I'm done with grad school, I have to get the job that I'm going to grad school to get. So that's another level of anxiety that you're dealing with as you're doing the thing. And then you're at the end of it, and okay, then I have to really prove it yet again that I can get the job in the field that I've gone to grad school and invested so much time and resource into. So all of that I found created anxiety around the whole process. And I think at the time, once again, one of the things that I decided to do was just to keep forging ahead, never allowing myself to give up on the notion of getting the job, the thing that I invested so much of myself and my life into. And for all of us, I think we have different ways of coping and dealing with that. For me, it really meant a lot to connect with colleagues in my field, who I had a lot in common with, and I found that when I connected with people that I had a lot in common with, people within higher ed, I didn't feel like I was so much alone, and that I felt more positive that I would ultimately get that job in higher ed that I went to graduate school to get. So then thinking about another time in my life when I had to engage in the job search, after my family moved from New York City to DC, Virginia area, I stayed at home with my kids for 3 years. They were young kids. I stayed with them at home for 3 years. Re-engaging the job process after being out of the job market for 3 years, I was like, I'll take any job. I'll take any pay cut. I'll do anything. I just want to start working again. And that took a certain amount of fearlessness yet again. And I think at that process, because I was flexible, because I was willing to take any job in higher ed, because I'd already had a background in higher ed, I was just willing to say, you know what? I just want to be working again in my field. I had the flexibility of saying, I need to make money, but I don't have to make a lot of money, which thankfully sometimes that really helps when you don't have the financial pressure on your back. But yet again, the thing that I found helped me was being around people in this field who are doing similar things, who have the same kinds of desires to help students succeed. Being in an environment where your skill set is similar to the people that you're with. Having a background of already being in higher ed, relying on the past experience that I had, because you can bring the past to your present to help you cope in your present. And I found all of those coping mechanisms very helpful, but being involved in my job as I transitioned out of being a stay-at-home mom for 3 years and being in the workforce again, just working with the folks that that I was in this new office with and in the new role with, being in that environment and really investing myself into it because it was a chosen career really meant a lot to me. It helped me to transition yet again. And the last and most recent job search anxiety issue that I would bring up is recently, actually, I'm going to be leaving my current role. My last day here is 26, and I'm starting a new job in the School of Public Health on the 29th. And I was first interested in the position back in like December. And I applied in January and I interviewed in February. And I got a job offer in my April. And the process can sometimes be so long that I had to find ways of coping. I mean, really intentional ways of coping without going stir crazy. And one of the things I think that really, really helped me, and Rashonda talked about so many good tips, coping mechanisms. And I think when you're feeling anxious, coping mechanisms are the only things that get us through it. So for me, it was distraction. You know, the moments when I saw my brain reflecting so much on why am I not hearing? Why am I not this? Why is it me? Do they not want me? They don't really care about me. All of this. When those things came up, distraction for me was the way to go. And the way I distracted myself was, working out, doing yoga, going for walks, being with friends, just doing things that helped me to pass a moment that made me feel like so absorbed into the fact that I wasn't hearing from the job. That was really, really good. Physical activity was really good for me. Social engagement, the way to go. And then, for me also, I'm an extrovert and I like being around people. So just doing things that allowed me to stop thinking and perseverating on what's going on with the job search, that really was the best way for me to cope with the anxiety that I was feeling. And so, yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. And I think as I listen to everyone talking, I really think, it's important to try to refocus our energy when we know that anxiety is coming down on us. And we all have different ways of refocusing our energy. Everybody has a different way of finding themselves and being happy. And I would say do what you can. Recognize that you're experiencing what you're experiencing, validate it, and then go do the thing that allows you to get to the next moment.
Great. Nicole, thank you so much. Very powerful tips. My big takeaways are identify what works best for you. Acknowledge the fear, but don't let it overcome you. Be flexible and patient and connect with others that are sharing your experience, interests, or skills. So thank you very much for that. And for the entire panel, thank you so much for sharing your stories. Erin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. I want to thank everyone again as well, because that was just so wonderful to hear everyone's backgrounds and stories. So now this is your time, people who are attending in the audience. We want to know what questions you have for our panelists and Rashonda that they can answer. So if there's anything that you are wondering, or you just want them to talk more about something that really stuck out to you and interested you, please drop that in the chat. If you don't want to drop it in the chat publicly for everyone, feel free to send a direct message to me and I will ask panelists your question and keep you anonymous. So I'll give everyone a minute to go ahead and think of any questions that you have.
While we're waiting for students to think about their questions, Rashonda, I have one question for you. Could we add to the list of strategies to deal with anxiety, take a nap? And the reason I'm asking is because it's always do, right? But is it okay to just sleep and take a nap? Could that be a good strategy?
That is a really excellent strategy. And my only caveat to that is a nap is considered under 30 minutes. And so for many people, that feels really strange because we're like, oh, I'm going to take a nap, and we've been asleep for 3 hours, right? And then it throws like our circadian rhythm off, and we start to get into some other pieces of sleep into that. And so I always challenge people that a nap is really good. If you keep it under 30, it does kind of revitalize you and keeps you kind of healthier. When you start to go past that, when you wake up, you tend to feel more groggy, right? And so I think we've all kind of experienced that, like after an hour or so we've been sleeping, we're like, I feel worse, almost like physically a little bit. And so you just slept too long. And so I think like a good nap in between classes and between the day of like 30 minutes or less is like a really great like interventional tool.
Great, thank you. And Joanna, I loved your immediate reactions like, oh, I've been sleeping too long. And I see you provided feedback. I want to add thanks to Nicole. So I appreciate what you said about needing to get the job you went to grad school for, plus what it was like being a mother re-entering the job force. Thank you, Joanna, for sharing.
And it looks like we have our first question. So, Nicole, could you speak more on what it was like having to discuss a gap in your resume? And if anyone else wants to chime in too, that would be great.
Sure. I was honest. I think transparency for me is the most important thing. And they appreciated what the reasons I had. And if they didn't appreciate it, well, then maybe I didn't need to be there. So yeah, I was just very transparent about it. There's a way to indicate it in your cover letter. That, I think the sentence that I used was, my family relocated and I stayed home with my children to help our family transition. But you find a sentence and a way to say it.
Yeah, if I could add to that, having worked with students that graduate students that have been in this situation, I think sometimes it can also, like, we have this very narrow idea for ourselves of what work is and what experience is. And it's important to remember that, like, staying at home with your kids is not like not working. You're working. It's just not a job that society recognizes as something that's work a lot of the time. And so thinking too about what were some things that you did when you were like managing your household or managing, renovation projects or volunteering or helping on the PTA or like whatever it was you were doing, like talking about some of those things can be helpful too. I had a student who, and she was like an unusual situation. I would not expect all students to be like this, but she was doing a lot of volunteering because she was a refugee from Afghanistan. And so she was like, yeah, and I stayed home for like 5 years and I didn't really do anything. And I was like, well, there has to be something, like, let's talk. And she was like, well, I guess I like went around and talked to other like Afghan women about what it was like to relocate. And I was like, just like, no, you have to talk about that. That's something that's really cool. And so thinking creatively about, the other things that you did can also be part of your resume as well, in addition to just acknowledging it outright. So.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. And we have another question. How do you deal with lack of motivation and anxiety-induced procrastination in searching for jobs? Great question.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and take this one first, if you don't mind. And I think Nicole had brought up something too. I remember you saying that you're pretty extroverted, correct? Okay, so one thing that I've noticed, again, and I think we have this same sentiment of like what works best for you. I find that ways that maybe, let's say if you are more on the extroverted side, maybe having conversations with people who you've already, previously made like contacts with, or those who are, those you can maybe reach out to that, like, let's say they're working at an organization that you would want to work at. I guess that's to some of finding people that you can talk to and maybe talk through this process can be a great way to maybe go about reducing some of the anxiety that's associated with searching for jobs. You know, and I know that may not necessarily work for everyone, but I think in general, we as humans do like to talk through in some capacity through our thoughts that we're trying to process. And I think, again, relying on those like support systems, maybe reaching out to people in positions that you may see yourself in. Because again, I think like you never really realize how much people are willing to help. And in a way, I think, again, like building those networks and building those relationships with people, I think can be almost a work smarter and not harder kind of way of inevitably getting a job later on. So that's just one tactic that came to my mind whenever that question was proposed. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I want to add one thing. And then I see Meg, you've unmuted. So one piece of advice that I got is to budget time for the things that you actually enjoy, because procrastination continues to be a cycle when you're always focused on the thing that you need to be doing, like grad school work or applying to jobs. And you're never going to want to be doing that thing if you never have time for yourself. You're always going to be thinking about taking breaks. But if you budget time for the thing that you want to be doing and you're putting it off, then you've had time to do that thing. And so you can budget your time accordingly to also have time to apply for jobs. All right, Meg, back to you.
Yeah, my advice is actually in a similar vein. This is actually a strategy that I even use like for my work that I do, or as a student for my schoolwork that I do, is I also budget time to do that work, to like apply for the jobs or to do homework or something. Because I specifically really like setting timers. Like, I don't know if people have heard of the Pomodoro technique, where you set a timer for like half an hour or 50 minutes or something like that, and then a timer for a 5 or 10 minute break, and then another timer. I really like those because I think sometimes what I experience with the procrastination, anxiety-induced procrastination, is like that start paralysis, where you never actually get started on the task. And so I think if you set yourself a timer and you're like, I can do whatever I want with my time after this 40-minute period is over. I can go take a walk, I can go watch a movie, I can, watch, like call my friend, whatever. But for 40 minutes, like just work on as much of this as you can, and giving yourself permission to say like, it's okay if you don't finish something, but just work on it for that 40 minutes. I think the other thing that can be helpful with things like that is preparing ahead of time some of the application documents that you'll use for applying for jobs. So obviously you should be tailoring a little bit your resume and your cover letter. You don't have to write a whole new thing every single time you apply somewhere, but tailoring a little bit what you want to do, so that then when you are ready to apply, you're not having to start totally from scratch. You're just having to make certain tweaks before you actually submit your application. So.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of tailoring and tweaks, you still want to do that. I love, Meg, that you said you don't have to rewrite an entire new resume or cover letter every time, but it's way better to be intentional about the jobs that you're applying for when you're putting energy into that. And do take that time to tailor your application materials for a handful of positions instead of just applying to every single job on the planet that you see on Indeed, because you'll actually be saving yourself time by taking the few extra minutes in your job search now to be intentional. Yes, and a career coach can help you work on a template that you can customize. Awesome. All right. So I don't see any other specific questions in the chat right now. And if I'm missing anything, please call out or just re-paste your question in the chat. But one thing that we didn't get too much into yet is anxiety around interviewing. So are there any specific tips, tools that you use, panelists, to prepare for an interview or to calm yourself down during an interview that you can provide for our audience?
I can say that I think that's where those mindful techniques, the deep breathing, and it, just before the interview and during the interview, I think can be really, really helpful. Because sometimes I know that I do get into a very heightened state. And it's a matter of giving ourselves positive self-talk and moments to kind of re-energize, refocus the energy to something that is more positive in the moment. Because, interviewing is performance art. We have to be energetic enough in the moment and present ourselves and prove ourselves in that performance. And it's very anxiety producing.
Yeah, that's great advice, Nicole. I also wanted to share too, just in terms of like that self-care aspect. I had a friend in college tell me something that I ended up employing for tests, but then also interviews. It was the quote of "look good, feel good, do good." And I feel like that is something that I still try to keep to this day. Just whenever you're going into different interviews and things like that, I normally try to make sure that I don't drink too much coffee. I get at least 8 hours of sleep. I have water next to me, and so I have it next to me whenever I'm speaking in an interview. And oh, Rashawn, I didn't realize you're LSU alumni. Oh, cool. Saw that in the chat. But yeah, and I think the look good, feel good, do good part is like, not only just feeling good in terms of, your headspace and how you're going into this, but, also dressing, as if how you feel good and professional. I think that can be a great way, even in this like digital world that we live in with like Zoom. I still try to dress like to the entirety, even though like, I know it can be sometimes easy to just throw on like a dress shirt and then, maybe have athletic shorts on, but still kind of like dressing and, feeling good in that. And I think the last thing too, which is kind of a more concrete a piece of advice, we'd have these like really great competencies, like GW professional competencies. I'll go ahead and share the link in the chat if I can. But one thing that I kind of did similar to this for different positions was I would write an example of like a specific story or something that showcased that specific professional competency. And these professional competencies are ranging like critical thinking and creative problem solving, communication, teamwork, leadership, professionalism, global perspective. And I would bring up one specific story to write down next to each of those professional competencies. So that way I had a pocket of just these really specific examples that I could bring up for interview questions. And a lot of times they end up overlapping in some capacity. So even if you end up using one for one of those professional competencies, there's a likelihood that there will be a separate question that is asked that it might still be able to be applicable for that question. So that's just one thing that I've found to be helpful. So, and hopefully that can help you guys as well.
Yeah, and I think I would echo that advice because I think that sometimes the anxiety that I would get into and that I see students getting into is they're like, how am I supposed to anticipate what questions they're going to ask? Like there's so many questions that they could be asking about. And I think instead of preparing for specific questions, if you just look at the skills and the competencies that they're asking for and come up with anecdotes that are related to that, then it doesn't matter what question they ask. You can also take time in the interview to say, you know, that's a great question. Do you mind if I take a second to think about that and think to yourself, what is the competency that they're asking about in this question? Oh, they're asking about teamwork. I'll pull out my teamwork, you know, anecdote. And yeah, and then you're not stuck like, I only practice for these questions and I haven't thought about my experience and, you know, I don't know what to say. So I think that can be helpful.
Erin, if I could add, I want to highlight something that Meg said earlier that I think can really help with an interview. And what she was saying was maintain your power. They're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them also. So the way that I like to talk about the interview process is to change your mindset from will they like me to will I like them also. So in that regard, it's not an interview. Think more entrepreneurially. It's a partnership meeting. And if I go in a partnership meeting, that means you have something I need and I have something you need. So we're on equal footing, so to speak. So if you walk in like that, oh my goodness, you know, the confidence level increases and you don't feel so much like you're being interrogated as opposed to just owning the power, the professional value that you have and how you can be an asset to that organization.
Absolutely. And I think Nicole said something similar as well. You want to make sure that you also like them, like Jonette said. But if they reject you or if you don't get the position, instead of thinking about it as a rejection, say instead it's a redirection to something that is more aligned and a better fit. No more rejection, redirection. So, all right. I know that we are past 1 p.m., but I want to ask our panelists one more question. And that is, what do you know now that you wish you would have known when you were dealing with job search related stress and anxiety?
You go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I wanted to answer that because I'm so glad you asked that because, okay, I have been on the hiring side. And when you're on the hiring side, you see things differently. You want the applicant to be a good applicant for you. You want a good match for your, you know, you want everything to work out for your interest for the organization. And being on the hiring side, I get to see, oh, you know, this person doesn't need you want the person to be successful, right? You don't want them to blow the interview. And I think if I can keep that in mind as a person being interviewed, then it's helpful to me to remember, just like when you're doing a presentation and you're talking to an audience and you've got all of these faces in front of you and some of them look completely bored or whatever. Sometimes you have to forget that you're in this performance moment. You're trying to do something that's still going to be something that they need as much as you need. So I always try to remember that now that I've been on the hiring side. It works both ways, as Jonette said.
Yeah, those are really great points, Nicole. And I think for me, I had taken three different bullet points that I wanted to talk about. But one, and I know we kind of mentioned this already, but like everyone goes through this at some point. If you don't, that's awesome. But yeah, everyone has probably at some point gone through this. And I think I try to remember too, and I don't think I ever really believed this, especially more during college, but everyone truly does have a different timeline. And I think like, again, the sentiment of like no rejection, only redirection, like I think there are so many redirections that we can go, and and I think it kind of goes into the last sentiment that I have of just like, there are some things that are just out of your control. And I think like sometimes when it comes to those, you know, redirections, I try to keep in mind that like, there are so many like other factors to consider on that hiring side of the process. And I think there are some things that are like, you know, internal hires or people who have just blatantly have had more experience that you just haven't had a chance to have just yet. And I think for me, I'm kind of comforted by the fact that, you know, it's not always such a personal thing. It didn't mean that they didn't like me. It just meant that there was someone who, you know, met their specific criteria. And yeah, so that's kind of the takeaways I have.
Yeah, echo what my fellow panelists said. I think that that's all like super important and very helpful to remember. And the thing that this isn't so much something I wish I knew, but it's something that I wish I had access to is I think, and I'm truly not just saying this, I think that the career services at George Washington as a whole are pretty phenomenal. And I really wish that I had had access to this type of career services from either of my other institutions that I attended. I got great educations, like the faculty members were great and my classmates were great, but the student services were not the same. Like when I was doing my initial job search, I was talking about, I did like it was like a chat drop-in session at Washington State that they were having for alumni. And I was like, how do I get a job in a field that I don't have experience in a city that I've never lived in before? And they were like, just network and talk to people. And I was like, just cold call them? And they were like, yeah. And that was the end of the advice they gave. And I really wish that I had had somebody that I could just talk with, like, here's what networking means and here's how you do it. And let's come up with a plan that works for you as an introvert who doesn't like cold calling and blah, 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 blah. So like really, really take advantage of this service that you are paying for as a student and have access to, because it would have been really, really helpful for me. So.
Awesome. All right. I was just trying to click the unmute button. Agreed. So that concludes our session today. I want to thank everyone who is in attendance, but most importantly, I want to thank our panelists. The advice you shared today was out of this world. Meg said career services at GW is phenomenal. I would agree with that. I think our panelists are also phenomenal. So thank you so much for that and just the wide range of experiences that you all brought today. Just a couple of things. Before we part ways, I would love to know if you all found this session helpful. If you did, you don't have to speak up, but if you could just give us a thumbs up with the reactions on the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And if there was a particular takeaway that you haven't already added in the chat, because our chat was very active this session, I love to see it. Please feel free to add that in the chat. While folks are typing in the chat, letting us know how they felt about the session, this session was recorded. So if you want to refer back to any of the advice that was shared, I will be sending that to everyone who registered. So you'll have the recording and other helpful information that I'll share with you via a follow-up email. I want to share that so Johnette and myself were career counselors in the Columbian College, but if you are seeking any additional individual advice, please reach out to your career center if you are not in CCAS. But otherwise, I'm going to drop our CCAS careers email in the chat. And if you have any questions, even if you're not in the Columbian College, we can definitely direct you to the right place. I'm so happy to hear that so many people found it helpful. Thank you, everyone, so much, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, and Aaron and Johnette for putting this on.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, loved getting to hear from everybody.
Awesome. All right. So it sounds like it's just